What if Carl Jung's most dangerous discovery wasn't about healing trauma, but about what comes after? What if it was about the final, terrifying stage of the empath's journey after narcissistic abuse, a transformation so profound it either shatters them into a million pieces or creates something psychologically unprecedented in human history? In his private clinical notes, Jung documented a rare type of individual. These weren't just survivors telling typical recovery stories. These were empaths who had endured systematic, soul-crushing narcissistic manipulation and had reached what he called the final stage of empathic development. They had undergone a complete psychological metamorphosis, emerging with what Jung termed integrated shadow consciousness and an almost supernatural immunity to all forms of manipulation. Why did Jung call this discovery dangerous? Because the empaths who reached this final stage often became completely unrecognizable, not just to those who knew them before, but to themselves. They had forged what he described as sovereign empathy, the shocking ability to feel the depths of human emotion while remaining psychologically untouchable. It was a level of consciousness Jung himself had rarely, if ever, encountered. This isn't just about surviving, it's about becoming something more. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Jung's most controversial work, revealing why he believed this devastating experience either annihilates your empathic sensitivity forever, or transforms you into what he called the archetypal wounded healer, a form of consciousness that transcends both victim and survivor. The key that unlocked this entire phenomenon for Jung landed in his office in 1928. It was a case he detailed only as M in his private journals, a 34-year-old woman whose profound empathic gifts had made her a magnet for a series of increasingly destructive narcissistic partners. When she first came to Jung, she was in a state he described as psychically dissolved. Her sense of self had been so completely eroded, so systematically dismantled, that she could no longer tell where her emotions ended and another person's began. She was a ghost in her own life. But over the next 2 years, Jung watched something extraordinary unfold. M didn't just get better. She didn't simply recover. She underwent what Jung could only describe as an alchemical transformation through relentless shadow integration. Where her psyche had once been a wide-open door, permeable to every emotional current, she developed what Jung termed conscious permeability. Think of it as a psychic immune system, the ability to choose, with surgical precision, what to absorb and what to deflect. Jung was stunned. He wrote in his notes, "M has achieved something I previously thought impossible. Complete empathic sovereignty. She can feel the depths of another's pain without drowning in it. She can detect deception with an accuracy that feels almost supernatural. And most remarkably, she has become immune to manipulation while retaining and even deepening her capacity for genuine compassion." The transformation was so total that Jung himself questioned if M was even the same person. Her family certainly didn't think so. Where she had once been the family's emotional shock absorber, their designated caretaker, she now set boundaries that were as calm as they were unbreakable. Former friends, used to her endless validation, accused her of becoming cold, distant, different. But Jung saw it for what it was. M had reached the final stage of empathic development, a stage he had only theorized could exist. He even noted the physical change in her, writing, "M's eyes have changed. They hold depths I've never seen, as if she has gazed directly into the abyss of human nature and emerged not broken, but wise." This is when Jung realized that narcissistic abuse creates what he termed the empathic crucible. It's a psychological pressure cooker of unimaginable intensity that either boils your empathy away until nothing is left, or it forges it into something far more refined, powerful, and indestructible. The secret ingredient? Shadow integration through forced individuation. Let's break that down. During narcissistic abuse, the empath is systematically and brutally forced to confront their own shadow, all the parts of themselves they've denied, repressed, or rejected. The narcissist, Jung realized, acts as an unconscious shadow mirror. They don't just inflict pain. They reflect back to the empath their own hidden capacity for manipulation, their own buried selfishness, their own disowned need for control. To survive, the empath has to go through what Jung called the 3 deaths. First, the death of their idealized self-image, the myth that they are purely good, endlessly giving, and selfless. They are forced to see the parts of them that were complicit, that enabled, that perhaps even enjoyed the drama on some subconscious level. Second, the death of their belief that love can heal anyone. This is a brutal one. It's the recognition that some people are not wounded birds you can nurse back to health, but black holes that will consume all the light you pour into them. And third, the most crucial death of all, the death of their need for external validation to feel worthy. This is the final chain that the narcissist breaks. When an empath realizes their worth is innate and requires no outside approval, the narcissist loses all their power. As Jung put it, the empath must face their own shadow, not through gentle introspection, but through brutal confrontation with their own capacity for darkness. The narcissist, in their destructive rampage, unknowingly becomes the catalyst, the dark guru for the most essential psychological work a person can do. Empaths who survive this crucible emerge with what Jung called integrated empathy, the ability to feel without fixing, to understand without taking responsibility, and to love without losing themselves. This isn't emotional numbness. It's the highest form of emotional mastery. The narcissist, in their attempt to break you, forces you to develop psychological muscles you never even knew you possessed. But here's where Jung's discovery took a deeply disturbing turn. This evolution, this attainment of psychological power, came at a staggering cost. The empaths who reached this final stage often became profoundly isolated, not by choice, but by necessity. The very transformation that made them invincible also made them fundamentally incompatible with what Jung called psychologically unconscious people. Think about it. Once you can instantly detect when someone is operating from ego, from projection, from a hidden manipulative agenda, how can you go back to normal conversation? This creates what Jung termed the consciousness gap, an unbridgeable divide between those who have integrated their shadow and those who are still completely run by it. It's as if you suddenly gain the ability to see the source code behind everyone's behavior. Jung's patient, described this hauntingly. She said, "It's as if I can see the psychological machinery of everyone around me, their defenses, their projections, their hidden motivations. It's all transparent now. But this clarity has cost me almost every relationship I had." Jung realized this was the hidden danger of empathic evolution. These individuals develop what he called archetypal sight, the ability to see past the persona, past the mask, and into the deep psychological patterns driving a person. And while this makes them incredible healers and guides, it makes casual, ordinary social interaction nearly impossible. Jung wrote, "They have eaten from the tree of psychological knowledge, and like Adam and Eve, they can never return to the garden of unconscious innocence." Even more disturbing, Jung noted that many people become instinctively uncomfortable, even hostile, around these evolved empaths. They can sense, on a deep, unconscious level, that this person sees right through their psychological armor. This triggers a primal fear, leading to rejection. Jung called this the prophet's isolation, being cast out not for being wrong, but for seeing too clearly. Through his extensive case studies, Jung saw that this empathic crucible was a crossroads. After narcissistic abuse, an empath doesn't just get better. They are forced down one of 4 very distinct pathways, with only one leading to this final, sovereign stage. See if you recognize yourself in one of these. Type 1. The dissolved empath. This is the most tragic outcome. These empaths never recover their sense of self. They become, in Jung's words, psychic ghosts, present in body but not truly alive. Their ability to distinguish their own emotions from others is gone forever, and they live in a constant storm of emotional chaos, often developing what Jung called perpetual victim consciousness, endlessly attracting the same abusive dynamics over and over. Type 2, the armored empath. This is the path of radical self-preservation. These empaths react to the trauma by shutting down their gift entirely. Jung described them as having built a psychological fortress around their hearts. It keeps the pain out, yes. They avoid further abuse. But they also lose access to their greatest gift. They become cynical, emotionally disconnected, choosing the cold safety of the fortress over the risky vulnerability of an authentic life. Type 3, the wounded healer. This is a noble but treacherous path. These empaths transform their pain into a passionate mission to help others. And while this is admirable, Jung warned that this type often remains trapped in compulsive rescue patterns. They've learned to set better boundaries, but their sense of worth is still fundamentally tied to being needed. They haven't fully integrated their own shadow, Jung observed, leaving them vulnerable to more sophisticated forms of manipulation down the line. And finally, Type 4, the sovereign empath. This is Jung's final stage. These are the empaths who have achieved a complete, radical integration of their empathic gifts with their shadow. They haven't just healed the wound. They've alchemized it into a source of power. Jung wrote, "They have become what I can only describe as conscious vessels, able to hold the full spectrum of the human experience without being corrupted or depleted by it." So what does this actually look like? Jung identified specific, undeniable characteristics of the sovereign empath. They can feel another person's emotions with profound clarity, but they feel zero compulsion or responsibility to fix them. They detect manipulation instantly. It's not a thought, it's a physical sensation. But their response isn't anger or fear. It's a calm, detached compassion for the unconsciousness driving the other person. They maintain boundaries without building walls. Their protection comes from a deep inner knowing, not from external defenses. And finally, they've developed what Jung called archetypal wisdom. They no longer see just a person's individual drama. They see the timeless, universal patterns of human behavior playing out. The absolute key difference, Jung noted, is that sovereign empaths have fully owned and embraced their own shadow. They've accepted their own capacity for selfishness, for cruelty, for manipulation. And because they no longer deny that darkness in themselves, they don't project it onto others. This makes them immune to the psychological hooks that narcissists use to control people. A narcissist's power lies in your denial of your own shadow. Once that denial is gone, they have nothing to latch onto. But this is where Jung grew cautious, documenting the inherent dangers that made him question if this evolution was a gift or a curse. First, the isolation factor. As he wrote, "They have outgrown the psychological level of most humans. Like adults trying to relate to children, the gap in consciousness creates an unbridgeable divide." Second, the burden of sight. They can't unsee the patterns. Jung called this archetypal fatigue, a deep exhaustion from constantly witnessing the same unconscious dramas playing out in families, in politics, in the world. They can see a relationship's fatal flaw on the first date. They can see through a political movement's empty promises. It's a heavy burden. Third, the responsibility weight. This is what Jung called the Cassandra complex. Like the mythical prophetess, they are cursed with accurate psychological insights that others simply cannot or will not hear. They see the solutions to people's problems with crystal clarity, but know that offering unsolicited truth is a form of violence and is almost always rejected. And perhaps most challenging of all, the authenticity demand. The sovereign empath can no longer tolerate inauthenticity, either in themselves or in others. They become, as Jung put it, truth sensors. The slightest hint of falsity, of a persona, of manipulation, becomes physically and psychically unbearable. This makes most forms of social gathering, from cocktail parties to family holidays, a special kind of hell. Jung's summary of this state is chilling. They have achieved psychological mastery, but at the cost of normal human connection. They have become bridges between the conscious and unconscious realms. But bridges are walked upon, not embraced. So, if this is the treacherous path, how does one navigate it? How do you ensure the crucible forges you instead of breaking you? Jung didn't just diagnose the condition. He developed a manual for this very transformation. He called it the Shadow Integration Protocol. And this wasn't traditional therapy. He described it as psychological alchemy, a process for turning the lead of trauma into the gold of wisdom. It consists of 4 distinct stages. Stage 1, shadow acknowledgement. This is the brutal first step. Jung insisted that the empath must first acknowledge their own capacity for the very things they condemn in the narcissist: manipulation, selfishness, cruelty, a need for control. You cannot integrate what you refuse to own, he wrote. This means looking in the mirror and seeing how your goodness may have been a mask, how your victimhood might have been weaponized, and how your empathic gifts might have been used to subtly control others. Stage 2. Projection withdrawal. Next, Jung taught empaths to systematically withdraw all their projections from the narcissist. This is about taking your power back. It's the radical act of recognizing that the narcissist's insane grandiosity was a mirror for your own disowned desire to be seen, that their cold manipulation was a mirror for your own subtle controlling behaviors, that their shocking lack of empathy was a mirror for your own areas of hidden emotional numbness. You take back everything you projected onto them, leaving them as they are, empty. Stage 3. Boundary alchemy. This is where most healing advice gets it wrong. It's not about building thicker walls. Jung taught what he called conscious permeability. This is the masterful ability to choose, moment by moment, what emotional information you absorb and what you deflect. It's developing what he termed empathic discernment, the power to feel without fixing, to understand without rescuing, and to love without dissolving. Stage 4. Archetypal alignment. The final stage, Jung believed, was to align with the wounded healer archetype. This isn't about becoming a therapist or a coach, but about embodying the profound integration of wisdom and compassion. It's accepting that your specific suffering has uniquely prepared you for a role in the evolution of the collective consciousness. The most critical insight Jung emphasized was this: you must stop trying to return to who you were before the abuse. The chrysalis cannot become a caterpillar again, he wrote. The goal is not recovery, but metamorphosis. This isn't just theory. Jung saw this pattern play out in real life and throughout history. He saw success in his own life, admitting in his private writings that his greatest psychological theories were born from surviving manipulation by authority figures. He wrote, "My tormentors unknowingly became my greatest teachers." He also documented a composer who, after surviving an abusive marriage, channeled her trauma into music so powerful. Jung called it archetypal, speaking directly to the soul of humanity. The common thread? They all saw their abuse as an initiation, not just victimization. But he also documented the failures, the gifted empaths who were destroyed. They invariably fell into one of two traps. Either they remained identified as a victim forever, or they became a, quote, wounded wounder, using their newfound psychological insight to manipulate others in turn. The difference, Jung wrote, is not the severity of their trauma, but their willingness to transform poison into medicine. So where do you go from there? How does a newly sovereign empath, living with this consciousness gap, find connection? Jung developed what he called consciousness compatibility theory. He identified clear signals for recognizing other evolved souls, their comfort with discussing deep psychological topics without defensiveness, their lack of a need to be right, and what he called archetypal humor, the ability to find a strange lightness in the darkest patterns of human behavior. He urged these individuals to seek out relationships built on conscious intimacy, not shared trauma or projection. But he gave a stark warning against trying to maintain relationships with unconscious individuals out of guilt or obligation. The butterfly cannot pretend to still be a caterpillar, he wrote. Attempting to do so serves no one and dishonors the transformation. Jung saw this entire journey, from breakdown to breakthrough, as 5 distinct metamorphoses. Metamorphosis 1. The dissolution. This is the psychological death during the abuse. It feels like hell, but Jung called it a blessed disintegration, the necessary destruction of a false self. Metamorphosis 2. The descent. This is the journey into your own underworld after the abuse ends. It looks like depression, but it is actually the sacred work of facing your own shadow. Metamorphosis 3. The integration. You begin consciously choosing which parts of your shadow to embrace and which to transform. You learn to feel your anger without becoming cruel, to own your power without becoming a bully. Metamorphosis 4. The emergence. Your empathic gifts return, but they are refined, controlled, and powerful. You can feel everything, but you are no longer a slave to it. Metamorphosis 5. The sovereignty. This is the final stage. You develop archetypal consciousness, seeing beyond the personal drama to the great sweeping patterns that govern all human life. You become the bridge. Jung's final insight into this phenomenon is perhaps his most profound and the most important for you to hear today. He came to believe that sovereign empaths represent an evolutionary leap, a new form of human consciousness that is essential for our species' survival. In a world drowning in narcissism, manipulation, and unconsciousness, the sovereign empath is the antidote. They are the living embodiment of integrated consciousness, capable of feeling the full spectrum of human pain and joy without being broken by it. Their suffering was never just personal, it was archetypal. They were chosen to endure the crucible, to walk through the fire of the collective human shadow, and to emerge with the medicine our species desperately needs. Jung's most dangerous discovery, then, wasn't a warning, but a prophecy. It revealed that the deepest wounds, when integrated with courage and consciousness, become humanity's greatest gifts. The narcissist, in their blindness, unknowingly serves as the dark priest of the empath's initiation. Through their cruelty, they forge the very consciousness that will ultimately heal the world of the darkness they represent. Your journey through narcissistic abuse, if you allow it, is not the end of your story. It is your initiation. It is your becoming. Not despite your suffering, but because of it. If you recognize yourself in this journey, if you feel this transformation happening within you, claim it in the comments below. Write, "I am becoming sovereign." Your transformation serves not just your own healing, but the evolution of us all. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.